The system beneath change. Most people try to change their lives through effort, motivation, or discipline, yet their results rarely last. They resolve to eat better, speak with confidence, or stay calm under pressure, only to relapse into old patterns within weeks. The problem isn't a lack of willpower, it's a misunderstanding of how the human system is built. Real change happens not through force, but through precision, by working with the brain's internal wiring rather than against it. Human behavior operates according to a learnable architecture. Every choice, reaction, and habit is the output of three simultaneous decisions: what we focus on, what we decide it means, and what we choose to do next. Those micro-decisions, repeated thousands of times per day, create the emotional states that determine our actions and ultimately our identity. Change the system that governs them, and transformation becomes not a struggle, but an inevitability. This book is a manual for that process. It combines principles drawn from neuro-linguistic programming, cognitive conditioning, and behavioral design into a clear, repeatable framework for rewiring belief, emotion, and behavior at their source. You will learn how to interrupt destructive patterns, redefine the meanings that drive your emotions, and build a nervous system conditioned for empowerment rather than resistance. You won't find abstract motivation here. Every chapter is built for action, practical tools, language shifts, and sensory retraining exercises that translate psychological theory into measurable results. By applying them, you'll discover that your limitations are not fixed. They are coded responses that can be rewritten. The goal is not simply to achieve more, but to evolve faster. Change your focus, alter your meanings, and take deliberate action long enough, and your identity itself begins to reconfigure. This is the science of rewiring your brain for fast, lasting change. Chapter 1: The Three Decisions That Shape Destiny. Every experience you have is shaped by three silent decisions: what to focus on, what meaning to give it, and what to do next. These micro-choices, repeated constantly, form the structure of your identity. As Tony Robbins explains, focus directs emotion, meaning shapes belief, and action determines destiny. Richard Bandler and John Grinder showed that the brain filters reality through deletion, distortion, and generalization. We never see life itself, only our internal map of it. Focus selects a fragment of experience, meaning labels it through language, and action expresses that internal map in the body. Two people can live through the same event and inhabit entirely different worlds because they assign different meanings. Focus is power. Where attention goes, energy follows. When you train attention toward possibility instead of fear, the body's chemistry changes instantly. Meaning is language in motion. Words are commands to the nervous system. Calling a setback failure creates paralysis. Calling it feedback ignites learning. Action is the proof of interpretation, the way the body speaks what the mind believes. This sequence, focus, meaning, action, is self-reinforcing. Each loop trains the nervous system to expect either limitation or freedom. Changing any element changes the whole pattern. By asking better questions, what else could this mean? And taking any small physical step, you interrupt the old circuit and create a new one. In practice, notice what you're focusing on, redefine its meaning to serve your growth, and take one purposeful action immediately. The repetition of these steps, under emotion, rewires the neural pathways that govern identity. As Bandler wrote, change the structure and the experience changes. In other words, you become the consistent result of the focus you hold, the story you tell, and the actions you repeat. Chapter 2: Reprogramming. Belief architecture. Beliefs are not thoughts we hold. They are neurological commands that shape what we see, feel, and do. They determine the limits of possibility long before logic becomes involved. Tony Robbins describes belief as a feeling of certainty, a sensation encoded in the nervous system, rather than an abstract idea. When we say, "I am terrible at this," we are not describing reality. We are programming the brain to search for proof. Richard Bandler and John Grinder revealed that these internal rules are sustained by linguistic distortions. Words like failure, rejection, or never freeze fluid experiences into fixed identities. This process, which they called nominalization, turns verbs into nouns, movement into prisons. Once the mind mistakes a temporary setback for an enduring truth, emotion follows, and behavior aligns with limitation. The antidote is precision. The meta-model developed in The Structure of Magic challenges these distortions through questions that restore missing information. When someone says, "I always fail," the question, "always? Can you recall one time you didn't?" breaks the trance of generalization. Each answer adds sensory detail, reconnecting language to experience and reopening choice. Belief change, then, is not mystical but mechanical. It is the relinking of words, images, and feelings into a structure that supports growth instead of fear. Robbins's neuro-associative conditioning expands this into action. To alter belief, one must link intense pain to the old idea and pleasure to its replacement. The nervous system learns through contrast, not discussion. Practice it daily. Identify a belief that limits you, recall its emotional cost, and then imagine vividly what freedom feels like until the new association becomes automatic. As Bandler wrote, "Change the structure and the experience changes." Belief, once rewired, becomes the architecture of possibility, the foundation of every transformation to come. Chapter 3. Redesigning your value hierarchy. Every decision, from the smallest habit to the grandest ambition, is governed by an invisible ranking of values, the emotional states we pursue or avoid above all else. Tony Robbins called this the hierarchy of values, a living structure that determines what we notice, how we interpret events, and where we direct effort. In neuro-linguistic programming, these values are seen as meta-programs, the unconscious filters that decide whether we move toward pleasure or away from pain. Sue Knight and Shel Rose-Charvet expanded this understanding into the language of motivation. Our words reveal which values dominate our system. When someone says, "I just don't want to lose control," their highest value is safety, not freedom. When another says, "I live for challenge," their nervous system ranks growth above comfort. The hierarchy itself is neither good nor bad. It simply explains why logic fails to override emotion. Conflict arises when competing values occupy the same level. A person who values both freedom and intimacy may feel torn between independence and connection. The resolution is not sacrifice but reorganization. As Knight explains in NLP Solutions, changing behavior often requires changing the internal ranking of values so they stop fighting for control. Robbins adds that fulfillment comes when our top values align with purpose, when growth, love, and contribution lead, while comfort and certainty follow as rewards, not requirements. To redesign your hierarchy, begin by listing the states you most desire: love, achievement, peace, excitement, and rank them honestly. Then notice which rules you've attached to each. I feel successful only when. Simplify them so that positive states depend on actions within your control. The nervous system learns fastest through clarity. When values and rules are aligned, behavior becomes effortless. A conscious hierarchy ends internal sabotage and transforms willpower into natural direction, the moment when life stops feeling like conflict and starts feeling like flow. Chapter 4. Rules, the invisible prison. If values are the destinations of the human experience, rules are the conditions we attach to reaching them. They determine when and how we allow ourselves to feel successful, loved, or fulfilled. Most people's pain originates not from broken values but from impossible rules. Tony Robbins observed that unhappiness comes from rules that make joy nearly unreachable. For instance, I'll feel confident only when everyone approves of me. These are neurological booby traps, turning fulfillment into a moving target. In the linguistic framework of Richard Bandler and John Grinder, such rules reveal modal operators of necessity, words like must, should, have to, which signal internal compulsion. The unconscious mind treats them as commands rather than preferences, shrinking choice and amplifying guilt. The first step in liberation is awareness. Listen for the phrases that control you. I should call more. I have to win. I must not fail. Then apply the meta-model challenge from the structure of magic. Ask, or what would happen if you didn't? This question dissolves rigid cause-effect beliefs by forcing the mind to explore alternatives. As Bandler explained, the moment you identify the hidden consequence, usually rejection or shame, you reclaim the option to redefine it. Healthy rules are internal and attainable. Robbins advises rewriting them so that pleasure is easy to access and pain remains a useful signal, not a punishment. I feel successful anytime I give full effort transforms achievement from a distant summit into a daily experience. Sue Knight's business applications of NLP echo this principle. Cultures flourish when success criteria are simple, immediate, and within personal control. To rewrite your rules, translate every external dependency into an internal standard, something you can do now without permission. The result is emotional sovereignty, freedom to experience satisfaction by choice, not by circumstance. When your rules serve your values instead of restricting them, fulfillment becomes a system, not an accident. Chapter 5: Neuro-Associative Conditioning. Rewiring through pain and pleasure. Human behavior is governed by a simple neurological law. Whatever the nervous system links to pain, it will avoid. Whatever it links to pleasure, it will pursue. Tony Robbins called this neuro-associative conditioning, a conscious method for reshaping emotional wiring through deliberate association. Richard Bandler and John Grinder had already mapped the mechanics in their work on anchoring. Every emotional state is a conditioned response, triggered by specific sensory cues such as tone, posture, or imagery. The body does not respond to reason, it responds to the patterns it has practiced. Each time a stimulus and emotion fire together, neurons bind them into a single circuit. Over time, that circuit becomes identity. The tragedy of human behavior is that many of these associations are accidental. Comfort food, procrastination, or self-doubt all began as strategies that once eased pain. They became habits because they worked, briefly. The solution is not to suppress these impulses, but to rewrite their links. As Robbins explains, lasting change requires creating immediate pain for the old pattern and immediate pleasure for the new one. This can be done through visualization, physical movement, or intensified emotional contrast. When the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change, the nervous system shifts automatically. Bandler demonstrated this through pattern interruption, exaggerating or flooding the behavior until the mind detaches from its old association. Once the pattern breaks, a new anchor must be installed, an empowering behavior tied to strong positive emotion. Repetition under intensity cements the new connection. Vaknin's Compendium of NLP Techniques notes that consistency, not duration, determines permanence. The brain learns through frequency, not philosophy. Rewiring through pain and pleasure is not punishment or reward, it is alignment with biology. When emotion and meaning point in the same direction, change no longer requires willpower. It becomes instinct. Chapter 6: The Power of Questions. The human mind is a precision instrument designed for answers, but it cannot resist a question. Whatever we ask, consciously or not, directs focus, emotion, and ultimately destiny. Tony Robbins teaches that the quality of your life is the quality of your questions, because each question acts as a command to the nervous system. It determines what we notice, which memories we retrieve, and what possibilities we allow. In The Structure of Magic, Richard Bandler and John Grinder showed that language both represents and reshapes reality. Questions, in particular, function as linguistic levers. They recover deleted information, challenge distortions, and reframe generalizations. When we ask, "Why does this always happen to me?" the brain obliges by searching for proof of helplessness. When we ask, "How can I use this?" it begins scanning for strategy and control. The question defines the emotional state before any answer appears. Rose Charvet expanded this insight in Words That Change Minds, demonstrating that people reveal their motivational patterns through habitual questioning. What's wrong? signals an away from orientation, attention anchored in avoidance, while what do I want instead activates a toward state of creation. The difference is biochemical, cortisol versus dopamine. Questions are not intellectual, they are physiological. They reroute blood flow between the threat and reward centers of the brain. To master this process, Robbins recommends cultivating power questions, simple, emotionally charged prompts that shift state instantly. What am I grateful for? What can I learn here? What can I do right now to move forward? Each one interrupts the trance of reaction and replaces it with direction. Over time, these habitual questions form a cognitive reflex, conditioning the mind to seek solutions instead of problems. The practice is deceptively small, but neurologically profound. Since focus creates feeling and questions control focus, the person who controls their questions ultimately controls their experience of life. Chapter 7. Transformational Language and Metaphor. Words are not labels for reality, they are the levers that move it. Every phrase you speak carries a set of sensory instructions that shape perception and emotion. In Transformations, Richard Bandler and John Grinder demonstrated that language operates as a form of hypnosis, continuously inducing states by directing attention to specific sensory channels. When you say, "This situation is heavy," the body subtly mirrors that metaphor. Posture compresses, breathing slows, and emotion follows. Change the phrase to, "This feels challenging but lightening," and the physiology adapts instantly. The nervous system obeys language because it cannot distinguish between an external command and an internal description. Tony Robbins calls this transformational vocabulary, the deliberate use of words to regulate emotional intensity. A single substitution can shift an entire state. Anger becomes irritation, fear becomes anticipation, failure becomes feedback. These linguistic recalibrations do not deny reality, they reframe its meaning at the neurological level. Metaphors perform the same function on a larger scale. They are mental blueprints for experience, translating complexity into imagery the body understands. If life is a battle, the mind prepares for defense. If life is a journey, it looks for direction. Sue Knight's NLP Solutions notes that organizational change succeeds only when leaders transform the metaphors through which teams view their challenges. Shel Rose Charvet adds that even simple shifts from problem to situation reduce threat response and increase creativity. Because the brain stores meaning in stories, the metaphors we repeat become the architecture of belief. The practice is simple yet radical. Monitor your habitual phrases for emotional exaggeration, replace them with empowering alternatives, and choose metaphors that inspire movement rather than confinement. Language, used consciously, is not merely expression, it is engineering. Every sentence either maintains an old state or builds a new one, and mastery begins the moment we speak as though our words are tools, not reflections. Chapter 8. Mastering Submodalities and State Control. Every emotional state is constructed from sensory code, the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic details through which the mind represents experience. In neuro-linguistic programming, these microscopic variables are called submodalities: brightness, size, distance, tone, rhythm, and texture. Richard Bandler discovered that by changing these elements, a person can instantly alter the intensity and meaning of any memory. A frightening image made small and dim loses its power. A goal imagined large, bright, and close feels irresistible. Tony Robbins adopted this principle as the foundation of self-directed neuroconditioning. The brain treats imagined stimuli as real. Therefore, by recoding internal imagery, we literally change our chemistry. The difference between anxiety and excitement is often nothing more than the color and speed of the internal movie. Submodalities explain why logic alone rarely shifts emotion. The nervous system does not operate through sentences, it responds to sensory patterns. In Unlimited Power, Robbins introduced the swish pattern, a structured technique for replacing an unwanted habit or self-image with a compelling alternative. The process begins by visualizing the old behavior, then rapidly swishing in a bright, vivid picture of the desired identity until the nervous system automatically triggers the new state. Bandler's early demonstrations showed that this rapid substitution rewires associative circuits through repetition and speed, bypassing analytical resistance. State control, then, is not suppression, it is design. By mastering the internal controls of imagery, sound, and feeling, you determine how reality is coded in your nervous system. Sue Knight described this as running your own brain, a skill that transforms emotion from obstacle to instrument. Begin each day by rehearsing success in sensory detail. See it, hear it, feel it, and your physiology will follow. When you learn to edit the submodalities of experience, you no longer wait for confidence or calm, you create them. Chapter 9: Modeling Excellence and Building Influence. Success is not mysterious, it is structured. Neuro-Linguistic Programming was founded on this idea when Richard Bandler and John Grinder began studying the behavioral patterns of exceptional therapists like Milton Erickson and Virginia Satir. They asked a radical question: what exactly do successful people do differently, internally and externally, that produces their results? From that inquiry came the discipline of modeling, decoding excellence into reproducible strategies. Every act of genius, they found, follows an identifiable syntax of beliefs, physiology, and language. Once that sequence is understood, it can be taught, replicated, and improved. Tony Robbins built his career by applying this principle to human achievement. His ultimate success formula: know your outcome, take action, observe feedback, adjust until you succeed, is a behavioral translation of NLP modeling. It mirrors the nervous system's natural learning loop. Sue Knight extended this framework to leadership and business, showing that organizations evolve fastest when they model the thinking and communication patterns of their top performers rather than relying solely on instruction. Modeling captures the how, not just the what, of success. Influence begins the same way, by establishing rapport, the unconscious alignment of physiology, tone, and pacing that signals safety and similarity. In Frogs into Princes, Bandler described rapport as the gateway to trust, a state achieved by subtly matching another's breathing, gestures, or speech rhythm. Once trust forms, gentle leading, slowing your tempo or altering posture, allows the other person's state to follow yours. True influence is not manipulation, but synchronization. It respects the other person's map of reality while inviting expansion. To practice modeling, observe a person who excels in any area. Notice their beliefs, their sensory focus, their physical presence, and the order in which they occur. Reproduce that sequence in yourself until it feels natural. Excellence is not talent, it is pattern, and every pattern can be learned. Chapter 10: Deep Rewiring. Hypnosis, identity, and unconscious communication change becomes permanent when it reaches the unconscious, the vast network that runs the body, stores memory, and regulates automatic behavior. Richard Bandler and John Grinder demonstrated in trance formations that hypnosis is not a mysterious state, but a natural function of attention. Every conversation, every thought pattern, already operates as a form of trance. Focus narrows, language guides imagery, and physiology follows. By learning to communicate with the unconscious directly, we can reprogram the patterns that logic cannot reach. Milton Erickson's genius, which inspired much of NLP, lay in using tone, rhythm, and metaphor to bypass resistance. When a suggestion is delivered as a story or question, the critical mind relaxes, and new associations take root below awareness. Tony Robbins reframed this process as identity conditioning. Lasting transformation occurs when behavior aligns with a new self-concept. Saying, "I'm trying to quit," keeps the old identity alive. Saying, "I'm not a smoker," installs a new command at the deepest neurological level. Belief, language, and physiology must converge for change to become automatic. Each repetition strengthens the neural circuitry until the new pattern feels innate. Unconscious communication extends beyond words. Micro-expressions, breathing rhythms, and subtle movements all transmit meaning before speech begins. By matching these signals, rapport becomes instantaneous. By shifting them, we can lead others toward calm or confidence. Vaknin's NLP compendium describes this as anchoring through presence, turning one's entire physiology into an influence channel. The final stage of rewiring is action integrated with identity. Repetition without self-definition reverts to habit, but action informed by a new sense of who you are rewrites the system permanently. When your language, imagery, and physiology agree, the unconscious accepts the update. Transformation ceases to be an effort of will, it becomes a reflex of who you have become. Conclusion: the mandate of massive action. Knowledge changes nothing until it becomes movement. All the models, reframes, and linguistic tools of neuro-linguistic programming mean little without consistent, embodied application. Tony Robbins calls this massive action, not random busyness, but deliberate repetition that conditions new neural pathways until they become instinct. Richard Bandler and John Grinder described the same principle decades earlier. Transformation occurs only when a new pattern is acted out under real emotion. Thinking differently is rehearsal. Doing differently is rewiring. Every exercise in this book, from altering submodalities to redefining beliefs, works because it links insight to physiology, turning theory into neural structure. Massive action is the bridge between identity and destiny. The nervous system learns through frequency, not intensity alone. Small, repeated adjustments, asking better questions, choosing empowering language, replacing rules, modeling excellence, build new default settings in perception. Change therefore accelerates not through effort, but through continuity. Each time you apply a principle, you carve another groove of possibility into the brain. Eventually, the new behavior becomes the path of least resistance, the way electricity prefers to travel. Yet action without awareness can also recondition the old limitations. The secret is to act with state control. Engage body and emotion deliberately so that every repetition carries the signal of certainty. Robbins' method of linking pleasure to progress and pain to stagnation aligns motivation with biology. Bandler's anchoring and pattern interruption techniques ensure that even setbacks become data, not defeat. The practitioner learns to view every response as feedback, every obstacle as information for refinement. Fulfillment, as Robbins often reminds, is not achieved by reaching goals, but by growing through them. Growth itself is the ultimate human need, because it proves life is expanding. Through NLP, growth becomes a science, the systematic upgrading of focus, meaning, and behavior. The result is not just achievement, but adaptability, the ability to reshape perception at will. That flexibility is true freedom. Massive action, then, is not about working harder. It is about rehearsing the future until it replaces the past. It is the steady, conscious performance of who you intend to become. When you speak in empowering metaphors, feel the physiology of confidence, and take actions consistent with your chosen identity, the unconscious recalibrates around that standard. Change ceases to be effort. It becomes nature. The mandate is simple. Practice what you now know until it becomes who you are. Use language as architecture, emotion as fuel, and action as reinforcement. In time, the triad of focus, meaning, and behavior will operate automatically, designing new outcomes as reliably as breath. As Bandler said, people are not broken, they are running patterns that no longer serve them. The work of rewiring is to choose better patterns, consciously, repeatedly, and passionately, until excellence itself feels effortless. This is the essence of fast change: awareness translated into momentum, intellect transformed into identity, and purpose expressed through continual movement. Take massive action, refine through feedback, and live as proof that the brain, when guided with precision and emotion, is the most adaptable system in existence. The future belongs to those who condition it,